Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Xiaomi Mi 3S. This is an Android TV box that sells for about $56 on GearBest. So it's quite affordable for a premium TV box that is able to stream 4K content from a wide range of services. Everything is built on in, so it's easy to use. Now, if you are familiar with Xiaomi's product catalog, you might be saying, well, that seems cheaper than the standard international version of the Xiaomi Mi box. That one sells for about 60 to 80 bucks depending on where you look. The price difference is because the 3S was actually originally designed for the Chinese market. It has the exact same internal specifications, but the only difference is in the software. The ROM that it's installed on the 3S is in Chinese, and so it has a few more kind of targeted services for China and shows, and other again, applications that you won't find here in the States. Otherwise, the overall performance is about the same. In terms of accessories, there aren't too many things that are included aside from the charger, and there is the remote and an HDMI cable. Taking a closer look at the design of the box first, again, exactly the same as the standard international Mi box. It's very elegant and simple. We have a polycarbonate plastic that feels surprisingly hefty and gives it a nice overall weight when you set it down on a surface. There's a soft touch rubber pad on the back that prevents it from sliding around on a surface or a desk, and there's an IR sensor on the front for the remote. On the back, there's access to a full USB port for accessories like thumb drives and keyboards. There's also a adapter for the charger. There's also a full HDMI port. The built-in remote here is also largely the same. The only difference is instead of a dedicated voice search microphone key on the right, we now have a menu key, which is familiar with most Android OS devices. You still have access to a microphone on the top, which is used for voice searches, but it's no longer as direct or as core of a function as it was on the standard version. And that's because the software that's built onto the 3S, which again is for the Chinese market, does not come with Google search out of the box. So again, the search function has been put off to the side. You can still find it and access it. I should also mention that the 3S, you can actually download the standard international firmware and install it on this to give you the same exact experience if you don't like the built-in firmware on this model. And that would actually save you a little bit of money. So if you want to save about $10, that is a possible way to go, although it's not built right on in and requires a little bit of tinkering around. The interesting thing about this remote is that it features a gesture area on the center. So you can actually rotate your thumb like this to go up and down through different lists, and I can swipe to go left and right as well. So there are both physical keys and a capacitive sensor, which makes the overall user interface seem quite smooth and responsive to navigate. There's also a power key, there's a home key, back key, and volume controls. Overall, the remote control is ergonomic, and the sensitivity is also quite good. You don't have to be pointing actually directly at the box, and it will still function and work. Underneath the hood, we do have access to a quad-core 2 GHz processor, and there's also 2 gigs of built-in RAM, supplemented by 8 gigs of built-in storage, which is sufficient from my testing for installing a few quick games and apps here and there. Now, the biggest thing that I would want to point out is all the menus are in Chinese because the Mi 3C is originally intended for the Chinese market. So you see all of these ads and things unfortunately can't be changed right out of the box. You can try to navigate to settings on the TV box, but what you'll find is that there is no ability to change language. So you're stuck with Chinese, at least for the moment. You are able to manually tweak it if you want to install a different firmware, a different ROM on the TV box, but that requires a little bit of tinkering and, again, searching online to figure out how to do. But right out of the box, this is what the experience is like. So this is a contrast with the standard Mi TV box, where the international version that comes with English and Google service is installed by default. So, for instance, on the very left side of the screen, we have the search page, and here we can directly search up any shows or programs. So I can either tap on this to bring up a QWERTY keyboard, or I can use the voice search function using the microphone. It's pretty easy to actually navigate and use because the controller supports these touch gestures, but if you don't want to use this hunt and peck method, you can also plug in a keyboard or connect a Bluetooth keyboard for easier text entry. So as you type along, it's going to populate it with the correct shows. It's going to show in the center, and it also can allow you to search up the web if you're trying to pull up a web page. And below the search box, you'll also find a list of recommended shows. Most of these are Chinese titles, but a few are English programs. Obviously, you can customize this more as you start using it if you only want to select certain types of channels. And the software is smart enough. It's a version of MIUI for televisions that it learns kind of your search patterns, that it will try to change the recommended feed depending on what you're looking at through your history. So it's kind of similar to YouTube's algorithms and how it calculates that. The other categories on the top here correlate also to children's, so children's shows, programs that are geared for kids, maybe under 14 years old. Here we have some dedicated again, some programs that we're commonly using, and down below here you'll also see some ads as well as news articles populate here depending on, again, the types of sites as well as RSS feeds that you enjoy reading, and clicking on this will quickly take you into the web page if you want to read up the news article. What I'm not a huge fan of, at least on the Chinese version, is that there's quite a few ads populating the pages. It's not a huge deal breaker, but at the same time, compared to the international version, it's a bit more cluttered. So the equivalent here in the States would be something like an Amazon Prime phone, which has lock screen ads. Again, you get used to it over time, but it's also one of the reasons why companies like Xiaomi or Amazon are able to put the price lower on the hardware, because they also have content consumption businesses. That is where some of their revenue comes from. So ironically, some of these ads are for Xiaomi's other phones as well as products, but you can see that this is what that looks like. And down below, I can look up some other categories, CCTV, other channels popular in China, things like that. So that's this page. VIP on the top here is for paid content. This one's for television shows. This is for movies. And here we have some music channels, entertainment channels, so things like American Idol or Chinese Idol, The Voice of China, so on and so forth. The settings here, we can take a look at things like the time and date. We can also go into our Xiaomi kind of Mi Home page, and what this allows us to do is actually manually add other Xiaomi smart home accessories, making the TV basically a central hub for controlling those things using Wi-Fi if it's all connected to the same Wi-Fi network. So it's actually a pretty cool application, just like on the international version. So if I have a Xiaomi smart light bulb, a Xiaomi smart air conditioning, or a smart plug, I can then control it here and turn those appliances on or off and connect them using this app. So that's how that part works. And again, you have some of these examples. E-light is their smart light bulb, things like that. Some of these characters, if they're hard to figure out, or if you don't want to install the English ROM, you can also use your phone and point it at the display. There's also an auto translate feature built into Google, so that you can actually translate some of these texts in real time to English, if that makes the setup process a little bit easier. Over here we also have the full settings, but again, there's no way to change language. The overall system navigation is fairly smooth. Again, it's intuitive with the bundled remote, but because MIUI is a pretty heavy customization on top of Android, and the specs here are good. I would say they're pretty typical for a mid-end TV box here in 2018 with that 2 gigs of RAM and that quad-core processor. Sometimes it does get boggled down with some of the animations that Xiaomi throws on top of things. So for instance, here are all the included and installed apps. You can see there's quite a lot on the 3C, just because it comes bundled with lots of services that are more commonly used in mainland China, and unfortunately not a lot of these can be uninstalled, but at least you can play around with them and figure out if you want to use them or not. If you've used a Xiaomi phone before, some of them will look familiar. For instance, there is a weather app over here. There's that Xiaomi Mi Home app that we talked about. Here is an app that allows you to control your installation settings, Xiaomi account settings. This is for mirror casting, so you can click on that and wirelessly mirror content from your smartphone's display onto the TV, which is again pretty useful. Since most of these are internet apps, they are still fully functional. They don't have any regional limitations. When I tried playing back a few random videos that I found from the home screen, all of the ones that I found here are actually fully loaded up. That's our review of the Xiaomi Mi 3S Android TV box. Overall performance is good. Just like on the international version, it's held up really well for streaming video, and for navigation, it all feels sleek, responsive, and fluid. Overall, a great content experience for something that is relatively low cost right out of the box. However, I can only recommend the 3S over the regular international version for 2 types of people. First, if you're on a budget and you want to pick up the least expensive model that gives you pretty good performance, and you're willing to tinker around with the firmware and install English language or even the international version of MIUI on here, then it could be worthwhile. The process, it isn't very complicated. You can search up on Google or YouTube, and there are lots of tutorials available. The process just takes a few minutes. No rooting is required, so it's a good way to save a few bucks. However, it's not included out of the box, and in that regard, it's not going to be completely ideal for every consumer, the average consumer out there. So just be wary of that. The second is if you are familiar with Chinese, if you are someone from China living abroad, or if you just want to experiment with more Chinese and other Asian dramas and content that you simply can't find on other TV boxes on the market, then this could be a good sneak peek into it, just because all the services are still fully working, despite the fact that this is loaded with that content and I'm here in the States. So if you're one of those two types of people, can understand Chinese or willing to play around with it, then this could be worthwhile because the price is lower than the regular version, and performance is exactly the same. However, if you want the smoothest experience right out of the box from day one, then the international version will be a slightly better pick just because of the firmware. So that's just a slight thing to point out. I'll leave links for both versions down in the description below, but that's pretty much been our review. So thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been the Xiaomi Mi 3S Android TV box.